Hello and welcome to another episode of Literary Liberation Podcast. Today we will be discussing, analyzing, and reviewing The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins. If you don't know, in eastern Kentucky there was some major flash flooding, mudslides, and then freezing, all that happened within the span of a few days. Kristen reached out to their local mutual aid organization that is raising money for multiple families and people in the community who were affected by this devastating weather. We will link their Cash App and PayPal and Instagram below. Please donate if you're able to. For more content outside of the podcast, please check our Instagram and TikTok at Literary Liberation and Twitter at LitLibPodcast. I'm your co-host, Mariah, and you can find me at Hungry Rye on all social media platforms.
And I'm your co-host, Kristen. You can find me at KRXXCXN on all social media platforms. Episode 2 of our Honey Games, the Hunger Games mini series, and leading up to Sunrise on the Reaping. This will be our last episode until that new book is out, and we have to speedrun reading it. So that'll be fun for us. I'm assuming it'll be quick because I feel like the Hunger Games read fast. Because you even read this one fast, even though you didn't
it
like
did take a long time.
We probably won't go too much into the author specifically this episode because we did talk about, we'll talk about like Suzanne Collins and like how it relates into this book, I think. But we did talk a lot about her like individual politics and like her growing up and stuff like that in the Hunger Games episode that was posted before this. So if you're looking for more of that, where we talk about like her controversies and not that she had that much to like say, like she doesn't declare any
Like, the
political
general
alliance.
background of Suzanne Collins and like who she is, kind of like what we were able to extract from some interviews and essays and whatnot. I was able to pull and just previous knowledge that we have had. So we have an idea of who she is and her politics, but she does intentionally stay apolitical. She doesn't post any political stances, as per Kristen just said,
Which is crazy. I'm not gonna lie. Crazy
in the year
stance to
of our
have.
Lord and Savior 2025, being like,
Like,
I'm not going to
I
do
feel
that.
like it'd be crazy. Like the fact that I've never seen her like say anything anti-Trump either.
It is strange.
Which like objectively you could be like, this book, The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, is a critique on fascism and like a critique on President Trump or whatever, because of like when this was published after being such like a long time from when the original Hunger Games trilogy was published. Because when was the last one of those came out? 2014?
Like,
2013?
I don't even think that. I thought it was like 2009, wasn't it?
The first one came out in
It's all in the
2008.
2008, 2009, 2010.
So 2010, and then this
So
was
Barack
published.
Obama was president then.
And then this was published, what, 2023? 2022? Something like that? I don't think you put
so.
on here. Sorry.
I did not. I think it came out. Sorry. Because like the movie came out last year, I
Yeah.
think. And I think it came a year out,
But
a year before.
It looks like 2020 is apparently when it came out.
Interesting.
May 2020 is what Goodreads says. So
this was worked on under a Trump
presidency. Yes. And published at the tail end of his first term. Basically.
Joe Biden's.
No, because Joe Biden didn't get elected until November 2020.
Oh, that's right. Sorry. Okay, so wait, no, who?
So Trump was president when this was published.
Okay.
And now Trump is president again in 2025. Sorry,
I was like, wait, what?
Because Biden didn't become president until 2021. Like,
yeah, I
technically.
I don't know why.
Anyways.
My brain is not functioning. I need to get in the mode. Get in.
But I'm assuming if she was able to publish like the Hunger Games, the Catching Fire, and Mockingjay all within a year of each other, I can't imagine she was working on this for very long. Like, the entirety of Trump's presidency. You know what I'm saying? I'm assuming it could have. I mean, she possibly could have started working on it like when he was running, but then it was like I remember the political climate when Trump first started running because I was a junior in high school and I was in an AP government class, so we talked a lot about like because it was like an election year and stuff, we talked a lot about like presidential running campaigns, so we watched a lot of stuff and like everybody like it was like a joke that Trump was running. I don't know if it was the same like around you, but it was like everyone was like there's no way he'll win. This is so silly, like goofy. And now look at where we are.
I remember seeing, I think it was during the Republican primaries, because I think that they had Republican primaries
Yes.
when he was running in
In
2016,
2016. Mm-hmm.
2015, 2016. But I was also like in college, so it was different dynamic because I wasn't in school. I was like freshly into college because I took a year off, I think. I don't know. It was weird.
Yeah. But I just remember like
I wouldn't have taken a year off. I graduated in 2014. What's going on? I don't remember. I just remember talking about it with like people in my real life, and we're like, oh, we're like so adults talking about politics. And Twitter was very much like hashtag I'm with her, pussy hat wearing. It was
yeah.
very strange. And then Bernard, poor Bernie didn't stand a
Yes.
chance with the DNC.
Yeah, well, because we like
So I wonder if the original books, because right, it was inspired by the Iraq War, so maybe Coriolanus was a placeholder for George W. Bush. Sorry,
originally.
that's my thought.
Well, because I
Originally,
mean
maybe.
like
But now it's still playing into like the populist politics, and I can never say his name right. Coriolanus is more of a placeholder for Trump. So basically, any like Republican figurehead, I think it's interesting.
well because
that like it could be any of them.
like he doesn't really have I feel like in the original like Hunger Games trilogy, like he doesn't have that much characterization. He's almost just like evil, twisty mustache villain that's like pulling the strings from behind. But even like in the end, like with Katniss killing, spoiler alert for the Hunger Games, I guess if you haven't read those, but like with Katniss killing Coin and stuff like that, it's almost like he's not even viewed as like the big bad in a way, you know? Versus like in this, I feel like in this book specifically, it like shows how evil he truly is. Which like obviously he was evil in the first book, but like they don't work off of that very much, I feel like.
I mean,
because they almost like
I didn't get that.
You didn't get what?
Really
that he was
didn't.
evil?
No, he's kind of just. We can get into it later. I don't want to like get into spoilers, just yet, unless you're ready. If we haven't even discussed the ratings.
No, I mean we don't have to, but I feel like this book shows how evil Coriolanus is. For those that don't know, the summary of the book is it's like what 70 something years before the first Hunger Games take place, or like 60, I don't know, so many years before Katniss's time, and it's basically like Coriolanus in like college, high school sort of thing, and like following what game. I haven't read this book probably in like 2 years, by the way. So
10th, I think.
Mariah's the one that just did a read, so she's going to be the one with most of the facts and stuff. But then basically following that, like one of the first iterations of the Hunger Games, and this is like their first idea of having like mentors, like Hamish's role being fulfilled, but they have it fulfilled by capital children, or like not children. I mean, they are children. You know what I'm saying?
They're
I
like
don't.
students doing like a senior project
Yeah,
essentially to help them graduate from high school. Like that's what they're doing. So they take these kids. They must be in like a special private school because his
yeah.
class doesn't have that many people.
I think that's what it is. It's like a special like it's like the children of like the high up people in like the government.
That's what we're able to extract though. Like you don't get a whole lot about it because you're kind of in like a moody teenager's head. But that's kind of like
It's third person
TLDR of what's
limited,
happening. Yeah.
so you're
So
getting
you're not really in his head.
no.
It's very strange compared to the other ones that were all like first person, which I was expecting this to be first person like the other ones, and I was kind of disappointed that it wasn't, given it's supposed to be like a character study. So
I wonder, do you
it makes it
think the new Hunger Games is going to be the Haymitch one? You think that'll be first person?
I don't know. I'm curious. I'm curious what will end up happening. Because I look at this, like compared to the other books, if you don't know what which we talked about in the Hunger Games books, is that or the Hunger Games series, is that the ratings were really high. Like all of them were about 4.5 stars, millions of reviews for each one and ratings. This one is the lowest scoring one though. It got 3.98 stars on
3.98
average
stars is still good though for Goodreads.
compared to the other ones.
Compared to the other Hunger Games, yes, but compared to like other books on Goodreads, this is still highly rated, I would say.
Yes, majority of people do rate it like 4 stars,
Yeah.
though. Like, it's the primary is 4-star. I did, like, the rating result demographic. So about 32% of the actual reviews were 5-star, 40% were 4-star, 21% were 3 stars, and then the rest were 2 and 1 stars. So,
I gave it
it's interesting.
4.75 stars whenever I read it in I don't know when I read it. Not last year, I think the year before. I think is when I
Like,
read
right
it.
as it came out.
I did not read it whenever it came out. I read it whenever we did our Hunger Games read, whenever because we buddy read the Hunger Games for whenever you did Evan's podcast in 2023. So I think that's whenever I read A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. I think 2023. I think.
Interesting.
Yeah, I read it. I finished it May 9th, 2023. So it's been almost 2 years since I've read it. So sorry if my memory's not the best about everything that happened in it because it has been a long time for me.
I just read it last month.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I didn't know what to expect going into it. I wasn't I didn't have any desire to read it. But then I read it for this and I was super disappointed in what it was. I was I was excited for the potential of what it could have been, and it really let me down. So whether or not we would each recommend it, I think is subject. I think if you were to read this, you have to be one really into the Hunger Games. I don't think you can read this as a standalone because I don't think it's a good story enough to read it as a standalone.
No, I think it's important. I think it recontextualizes Snow's character for like the trilogy because again, like I was saying in the original trilogy, Snow doesn't really get a characterization. I feel like it's just like representative of like government bad in the
Yeah,
trilogy. Is all Snow is represented in the trilogy while this takes him and makes him an actual character on his own rather than just being like government bad.
pretty much.
Which I still feel like
But
this almost has that same overarching message. But I do really like this book. I thought it was really entertaining. I think the beginning is really, really slow, but I think once you get past the first 25%, it picks up.
I thought it was kind of boring throughout the whole thing. One, because like him being like the main character, he's supposed to be like the villain. I was looking for like a really solid like villain upbringing story, and it did not deliver on that end. It very much gave like, which I read a lot of reviews were just like it's Hitler and his girlfriend. I was like, you know what?
Well, I
Kind
think
of.
that's just like, well, because like the thing is that I don't think it's possible to redeem this character. You know, like,
Well, I expected no redeemable qualities about him, right?
and he
But
doesn't have any.
I didn't. No, there's no redeemable
Yeah.
qualities, but I love reading a bad character though where they're just like bad in themselves. That's like what makes character studies like so interesting when you're reading like a really bad one. But this was not compelling enough to make me want to know like the inner workings of his head to be like, "Oh, this like if you read enough like fascist literature, understand like fascist ideology, like you don't need this."
Well, I don't think it's necessarily, but because like again, we talked about this in the Hunger Games trilogy originally. Like Suzanne Collins, objectively, like from what she's written, she does not read any type of like left wing theory or like understands any like left wing ideology. You can see this from the way that she writes about District 13 and makes it seem like, oh my god, this is a terrible place to live where everyone has enough food to eat. Wow. Sort of ideology. But I don't think that this is necessarily, and that's why I think, like, whenever you read the Hunger Games, if you are somebody that's like principled and left wing things, you have to read it as like for entertainment. Because if you try to like extract Suzanne Collins' ideals, you'll just get liberalism.
I think it's like a good way of like you can use it as a tool, right, to
Mm-hmm.
discuss like left wing ideas and like kind of meet people where they're at. In the same way that you can like talk about like a bug's life, right?
Yeah.
They both play into like populist politics, but you can kind of get people's heads around. And this is such a popular piece of literature that you kind of have to read it so that you can be like, hey, you've seen this. Look at this
Yeah, you know
dynamic.
how this
Now look
works.
at
Now compare it to the real
Karl
world.
Marx's
Yeah.
manifesto. Like he talked about this in the 1800s. Isn't that crazy? And then you can like build off of that. So there is utility. I don't think there is utility in this.
I think
That's
there
what I was going through. I was like, I wanted there to be utility, and we can get into the spoilers because there was a really good review from somebody from TikTok that a lot of people probably know in the bookish space. Which I need to find her ads
who?
specifically.
Mari?
Mari. Yeah, she posts bookish content. Let me see if I can find her. Because I know if I put the name, you're not going to know who she is.
I don't even know anybody named Mari, to be honest.
No, I swear you do. My name is Mari Book Talk Media Reviews. This person. Sorry, that's.
Oh, wait. Yes, I do know her. JK, I literally follow her. LOL. I know, yes.
I was like, I know,
I just
but I
love,
knew the
yeah.
username was not this, but it was just like it said Mari from TikTok, and I was like, oh wait, oh my gosh, I know who this person is. So
Yeah.
her review pretty much encapsulates what I said. It was a very long review, so I just pulled out an excerpt of it. So again, these are going to be spoilers. I had a lot of the 1-star reviews. A lot of people were very excited for this book. They read it all the way. Not a lot of them DNF'd it, which I thought was super interesting. That doesn't happen very often. Sometimes I go through 1-star reviews and it's just like a DNF'd at 3% because
Yeah.
there's no kissing or something stupid. But like no, like most of the people that were in these reviews, they actually had read it all, which was very, very different. But Mari's was really good. Where she said, I think it was in like one of the last paragraphs. I don't know how much of this you want me to read off.
I don't know. What do you think is the most
Let me
important?
see.
You bolded
Sorry, I made
apart.
this when we did. Yeah.
Is that what you want? Is the bolded part?
She said, I was never really here for a story that humanized snow, but this really wasn't that, and I'm not sure what it was. To think that in 2020, Collins got to flaunt her privilege by dedicating almost 500 pages to wondering what oppressors think or wondering how they might see and interpret threats to their wealth and power. I didn't deserve this. And she talks about some of the other things. Like, you can read through it. I urge people on, if you go on Goodreads, you can read it in its totality, but that was kind of like a good means of summarizing what she said was in that last little comment because she also asked like why was the point of view, what was the utility that this was supposed to show, like the themes. And it's like the way that Suzanne Collins is trying to get people to understand like a fash ideology, but it's not done right. I don't know how to explain it.
Well,
Like
because
I expected more and it wasn't.
well, I don't know if you can really, that's what I'm saying again, is that I feel like this is like not necessarily like this is no Marxist literature for me, and nor do I think this was an interesting story in the way that I really enjoy the world of the Hunger Games and like Pan Am and how it is structured and things like that. And I feel like this does a lot of stuff that is good for it, where it expands the world of Pan Am and you get to see a lot more of the world outside of just District 12 and the games. You get to see different perspectives of like the capital. And I wonder if it ended up making people realize like, because a lot of people now, especially too, they look at like the Hunger Games, they're like, oh, I'm Katniss Everdeen. Where I wonder if people look at this and realize that us as people in America should be relating more to the students of the capital and the students that are in uh what's
See,
his
that
face
was the
class.
thing, though. It's like the way that Coriolanus Snow like acts and works his way through society, like growing up in like a rural county. This is like how every like dude bro is.
Yeah.
Like everyone I've interacted with, like on
Mhm.
Facebook, like the people I grew up with, like they think this way, where they're just like, oh, well, this is the way it is. Like the system
They're
is,
like, "I
but they're
life is
not.
hard for me. It was everything wasn't handed to me." But then they don't have, like, the context to look at, like, actual suffering.
Yeah, and I didn't feel like it gave enough to understand like the tipping point between just being a reactionary and falling down the alt-right pipeline and becoming a fascist. Like that was missing from this because of Suzanne's lack of knowledge on the subject. And that
I
was
could see
frustrating
that,
because
yeah.
that's what I wanted.
Well, because, like, the thing is that I think my main problem is I see a lot of people whenever they, like, review this in negative, they're like, "Oh, like, it does all of this thing where it makes you sympathetic to Snow," and I feel like if you're sympathetic to Snow reading this, you're reading it wrong.
Because like I agree with like Barry's like I didn't think it really humanized him, but it didn't give enough to understand like what like to become fascist and go down that like there's a lot of like disenfranchisement and like being wrong at the wrong or being upset and angry with the wrong people and the wrong systems. Like they have it in their head. Like if you ever read Down Girl, The Logic Misogyny by Kate Mann, I think that is such a good primer to understand like why like men become incels and whatnot and like the way like patriarchal ideology like socializes men and like when like they become like family annihilators and stuff like what's going on like philosophically you need that with a story like this and I think if it had been first person and she could have played more with
Like, actually
his
what was
mentality because
inside.
we wouldn't want to make him seem like crazy because I don't think fascists are crazy but it's the way that they are able to um like logically come to conclusions like in their head not that it is in the full philosophical sense not not in like
Well,
I
cause
don't know
like,
colloquial
I would
sense.
say that, like, Notes on an Execution does it better. You know what I'm saying? Like, that
Yes, because like you
idea.
get this idea of like why somebody is so angry that they're able to commit these atrocities where in here he's just like oh we lost all our money I'm a nepo baby with
No
no more
nepotism.
nepotism.
Um,
And, like, there was points there, like, with the way that, like, the grandma talks about, like, the New World Order, which if you know anything about that, like, you grew up evangelical, you fucking know, like,
not
that in the
me.
context of, like, Revelations. So in Revelations, in the way, like, Tim LaHaye's The Left Behind series, which has really, like, been a modern day, like, Dante's Inferno, which completely changes the way, like, Christian mythos functions, that it kind of goes into that, like, communism and having, like, a single world currency is, like, a signifier of the end times, and that Lucifer is gonna come back, and your 7 days of like, all of this shit supposed to happen, right? So like her saying like, oh, they're drinking blood and playing into like anti-Semitic like stereotypes, and the New World Order is referenced a lot, and the way that they're what was the other things? They
Well,
said some other the cannibalism, like they participate in cannibalism, which is like low key an anti-communist point as well, because that was like something that was propagated with Red Scare, that I picked up on. I thought that was really interesting, but I don't know if other people were extracting that because I didn't see anything surrounding that
I
in
did not I don't
reviews.
even remember the to be honest, like, I don't remember this part of them drinking blood. Also, again, it's been 2 years since I've read it. So,
Or the Jabberjays work for the bourgeoisie. I thought that was really funny.
that's, like, the whole point.
I don't
That's,
know if
like,
you
the
caught
point
that.
of the
But,
Mockingjay
like,
is, like,
but
that's
I
how,
was like,
like,
"Oh, but they, like, made it, like, a real point." It was like, "Okay, so these are all, like, the points that I don't know if people are able." And not that I think people are dumb. I just don't know if anyone else would pick up on those things if they're just a casual reader
it kind
and
of
maybe you
reminds me.
aren't as, like, locked in with society.
Well, because, like, especially now, currently I'm reading Educated by Tara Westover, and her father reminds me of the way that Coriolanus Snow is. Not that you read the book or anything, her memoir, but, like, her father is constantly talking about, like, one, the feds coming to get them, but then also, like, the Day of Abomination or whatever, and they're, like, Mormons, so, like, I guess I don't know what they believe. I don't know anything really about Mormonism, but, like, he goes into, like, all this, like, doomsday prepping and, like, all of this extreme that, like, the government is all socialist and blah, blah, blah sort of ideas where it's just, like, these people are so, like, disillusioned in a way, but I feel like I can agree that, like, Snow is not shown as, like, disillusioned, if that makes sense.
Like, he's not, like, completely off his rocker. Like, he's very with it. Like, he understands, like, the systems that are at play. But then,
But his
like,
idea is how to make them benefit him because he cares about only himself. He doesn't care about anything else. He's a selfish person that lacks anything of empathy.
he has, like, this hyper individualism, and a part of me, like, he he is empathetic to an extent, but then it's not, like,
Empathetic to
truly
who?
empathetic. Like, it's, like, in the same way that, like, liberals, right, are like, "I have so much empathy for all this," but then they'll, like, talk shit
And then
about
let
people,
me
like, in
sign
certain, like,
Sejanus up for
countries
his
or unhealth
death.
people. Like, it's very it's strange. I what else? Do we wanna go there's so many different things. We could talk about the romance because I think the romance in this also frustrated me.
Well, I did
In
not view it as,
in
like, a romance in a way because, like, I don't think like, the way that, like I like Lucy Gray. I like her character, I like how she is, I think she's a fine character, where she doesn't necessarily do that much, where she's just, I think, somebody that is suffering under, like, late stage capitalism, and there's, like, theories or whatever that, like, the mayor put her up or whatever to be in the games, right? Because his daughter had beef with her or whatever, right? So it's kind of implied
yeah.
that, like, she wasn't actually picked for the game sort of thing, and I think she's just, like I think the idea is that, like, you know how liberals are like, "Oh, like, resistance is joy," or whatever? I can feel like that's kind of like Lucy Gray's character.
Ability to, like, fall in love or fall for somebody like
Well,
Coriolanus,
I
and
don't even
it
think she
is
was
kinda
ever
confusing towards the end whether or not she actually did, but at the
Yeah.
same time, we don't know. There's just not enough information, like, it's can be interpreted in so many different ways, like, towards the end of the book,
Yeah, it's left
but throughout
open-ended.
the story, you're kind of, like, going
Well,
through
you're
this, like, up.
also I think because you're in Coriolanus's mind, he's, like, views that she is falling in love with her, but I feel like, to me, I would never think that somebody was in love with me unless they're, like, very explicit about their feelings, and I don't think Lucy Gray was ever very explicit about, like, her feelings, because she was definitely using him to her advantage during the games.
Yeah, up until a certain point, like, I think
Because there's a
it seemed
reason
like in the
why.
very beginning, you can see why, like, her kinda, like, working him, and he's like, "Oh, she's, like, taking interest in me." But then as soon as he's in 12 because he's there's, like, a whole 'nother layer with, like, the whole,
It is a
the added
very
this is where Suzanne
long
Collins
book.
Suzanne Collins trying to make this connection that, like, the peacekeepers, but they're also police military, but in order to, like, get your debt or whatever resolved, you can join the corps. It's supposed to be, like, a commentary on how, like, young people in the
Are
Imperial
preyed
Corps can,
on
like, sign up and
for
preyed
the
on, but at the same
military.
time, it's like, so, like, yeah, I get it, like, they are police, but at the same time, I wouldn't have personally made the comparison of them being also, like, police because, like, police in the United States are signing up for that job unless you take it in, like, a, like, geopolitical sense of, like, being the world police, but I don't think Suzanne Collins was thinking that far ahead. There's no
No.
way.
I think it's
It's
because the way that, like, Pan Am, I think, is so isolated from the world, I'm guessing they don't really have, like, as much of, like, a military standpoint as they do, like, as America does. Because there's no
I don't
ever
know because
any
they were saying in the story that Pan Am, like, ran the world.
ran the world. But the thing is that there's not enough influences from other parts of the world that I feel like that's objectively true.
It was like a passing mention of, like, Pan Am as, like, an imperial power.
Which is I don't know because, like, again, I don't think Susan Collins' world building is all that strong because you don't see anywhere outside of the US, and I would like to think that if the United States went in the direction of Pan Am, I would like to think China would come help the proletariat of America. from that. You would think, right?
Oh, right? Like, that's what I wanna know.
Like, objectively,
If
like, but we don't know
I'm trying to
enough about it.
remember which one.
I don't
It
rec
was like a very passing mention that they were like, "Oh, this is what was happening." So I don't know. I'll have to find, like, the quote later. I didn't highlight anything because I ended up having to listen to this as an audiobook because there is absolutely no way I would have sat through and read all of this book. I would have DNF'd it had I not listened to the audiobook. And the audiobook wasn't bad, but there was no
people
way. I'm
like
gonna have to do
the
something like the sunrise on the reading.
You think you're gonna do audiobook for that?
Yeah,
I don't know,
I'm
I
not
don't
gonna
think it's
try.
supposed to
I
be
don't
that long. It's supposed to be a celebrity reading it.
I don't know, but here's the thing, it's like with the 2-star ratings, right? Let's circle back. A lot of people were saying it was cash grabby, which I can agree. I do feel like it was way too long for what it was.
I
I
mean,
don't think it needed to be so
the
long.
thing
Like,
is,
him
though,
overanalyzing Lucy Gray's lyrics, like, every time she sang a song, I was like, "Bro, shut up."
that's how they be, though, like, all of these, like, right-wing freaks are like, "The deeper meaning to this, blah, blah, blah," and then they just come up with something that doesn't even make sense. But,
Like, "Bro, I'm exhausted." But, like, off point, like, some of the ones he was like, "Oh, wait, this is about me." I
he
don't
thinks
know. There was
everything's
just
about
so many
him.
where he's like no, literally, he thinks everything's about him.
He thinks the
And
world
it's just
revolves
I was
around
over it
him.
by the end of the book. Also, this is also my own personal critique, the reference to Catching Fire and Mockingbird or Mockingjay
What were the
or
references?
the Hanging Tree. Like, it's just like she was just like
Well, because I think the hanging tree is actually
it's like a
supposed
fan service.
but the hanging tree, I think, is actually relevant to, like, District 12 because that was, like, a song that they did sing. So I can see, like, that connection. But there's even, like, in the I don't know, did they do that in the book too where they're like, "Oh, this is Katniss," and it's, like, the
Yes.
flower?
Dude, I like would have to stop and pause everything and just be like, "Why? Why would you why?" Like, big brain. That's why I was going through this, and I was like, "Why are you doing this?" Like, it just felt so like, "I see we're in on something," and I was like, "No, we're
I
fucking
think
not.
it's
We're
an
on 2 different
entertaining
pages right
read
now."
because I do really think I love, like, the way that the tributes are portrayed in the games. Like, I feel like once we get into, like, the games aspect of, like, the story, I thought it was a really interesting way that they're portrayed because it's like it's so different than what you see in Katniss's time because, like, at that point you have careers and, like, people that are volunteering because they want to be, like, getting the glory of the Hunger Games, while every single person that is in this games are, like, scared children still, and it's not viewed as, like, the way that it is. It's not popular with the capital, they're not watching it, it's not entertaining to them, it's not the spectacle that it becomes.
Like, it reads very much like gladiator battles, but after reading, like, Chain Gang All-Stars, it
Chain
really
Gang
set a precedent
All-Stars
for
is
what
much better
a
than
story could be, and I think that's why, like, I already don't like a lot of YA books because the politics of YA books kind of, like, frustrate me, and, like, the dialogue can be a little cheesy, which can be fine, but when it's this long,
I don't
that's a
remember.
big investment. It's a big time sink.
I
That's
mean,
what I think
yes.
about too, because the audiobook is 16 hours, I believe. It's a very so, like, if you're sitting down reading it, you're probably gonna spend at least, like, 15 hours. I would say, like, an average reader would probably spend about 15 hours sitting there reading it if you don't have, like, reading speed built up. I just wouldn't
I think if you
wouldn't
like
recommend
the Hunger
sitting and doing
Games,
like, that's what I mean, you have to like it to
but
read
I
it, and
don't
then
think it was made
even then,
for
like, you're not.
because I feel
But, like,
like
at this the point in history, like, at this point in the United States, I feel if you are going to make a dystopian novel that is supposed to be, like, very political, you have to full send it and not just fall back on just
but that's what liberals are
nothing.
gonna do,
I guess that's why we're here.
because that's, like,
You'd be so much better
liberalism.
off reading, like, anything else, honestly.
But I think
I
the thing
like
most people are going to read like, this is probably a lot of people's only interaction with, like, a fascist in literature. Like,
I would have loved that this had been from the perspective of Sejanus,
oh my
and
god,
it
yes.
ended the whole thing, like, you're working through it, he's in the Capitol, but he's also like, his character being a main character and having this best friend, like, your perspective, like, your naive perspective, betray you in such a way, this would have been a five-star read. I would have read
Sejanus is
600 pages of
quite
that.
literally my favorite character, and not necessarily the whole of the Hunger Games, but he's like top 5 of all Hunger Games characters. Sejanus is somebody that is like, as somebody who lives in, like, we live in the capital, you know, and he's just someone that you're able to look at and you can tell that he is actually like an empathetic person, and he feels guilty about the things that he profits off of and the things that make his family so much better off than all the families of the district. Not only because he did come from the district, which is District 2, which is still one of the wealthier districts, but he still feels so guilty about everything that happens around him. And I think objectively that, like, if Sejanus didn't die, I still think he probably would've, like, killed himself or something.
That would have happened, like, the way it was set up, and him and his, like, you saw it. You saw, like, the bricks were being laid
Yes.
for his path
I
in
think
front of him,
Sejanus would
and
be a
his
Marxist-Leninist king if he had theory.
I would have loved to see I think the story would have been stronger if it had been from his perspective as well. Because, like, at this point in time, like, do we really need a YA book that's like a character study on Coriolanus? I don't think so. I think you could have done it and had him be like the best friend that he like knew growing up. To see somebody like in your life as you are developing empathy that is unchanged and is also like starting to go down a different path would have been such a compelling story, and it would have been it's just better. Like, he
Yeah,
still would have had privilege, significant amount of privilege comparatively to other people in the districts, but
yeah.
then you'd also get some other insights on, like, his family and that dynamic, and it just
Well, because, like, you
I
even
needed that.
yeah, I think Sejanus's character because, like, the way that, like, even, like, his parents were, how they don't even comprehend that, like, how he views the world and about how he views, like, everything that the capital does so negatively. It reminds me of, like, me with my family and the people around me whenever I'm, like, so outspoken about my ideas, and then everyone's like, "Well, whatever, blah, blah, blah," and they very much, like, brush him off, and they're just like, "Oh, he's just a little odd. Don't get him started," sort of idea, and I feel like I and probably you can relate to that too about, like, the way that people treat us because our politics are so radical.
I get it's definitely interesting, like, you have to be very careful depending on where you live,
Mhm.
how you talk about your stuff. I am very much like a leftist in the streets, Marxist-Leninist in the sheets, you know, like, I won't completely expose my ass unless I know it's safe enough because people are weird.
Mhm.
People are well, like, if you say that, like, you're committing an act of treason against the United States if they still believe in patriotism and, like, the
Yeah.
American, like, ideal, like, it's scary. So,
See,
you have to
not me, I'm
be
full mask
intentional.
off. I
Couldn't
can't.
be me.
I could not. I don't think I just so the way that, like, my autism is, like, I feel like I can't like, I talk around it to if I really don't know somebody, but I think, like, everybody that, like, I know, like, on a one-on-one basis knows that I'm a communist or, like, knows that I identify with it. And then they'll
Like,
just
you live in a blue area, right? Like, where you live
yes.
predominantly, whereas,
Yes.
like, I have the opposite, like, the majority of
Yeah.
people, like, they're all Trumpers.
Yeah. I
It's
mean,
like a
there's still a lot of
minority to
Trumpers
even be a
here,
Democrat.
like, obviously, because, like, it's Kentucky, so, like, there is a lot of just because it's blue here and a lot of the people that I, like, are in my family are Trumpers or, like, they voted Trump. So,
I wonder if I can see what my county's, voting rates. Was there anything else, though, that you wanted to say, like, for this that you felt? Because I know this the reason why we ended up doing this, we were doing all of them,
yes.
was to build up to it, but I think Kristen had yeah, like, you felt very passionately. I remember reading your review and you're like, "This is it. This is." I'm curious if you were to do a reread, how you would end up
I
rating
don't
it
know.
if you
Well, because
did.
I don't remember what's happens. I gave it 4.75. I didn't write a review, so I don't know what review you're talking
I
about.
thought you did. Maybe you
Oh,
just talked about it.
I did write I said, "After reading the first chapter, I thought I wasn't gonna like it, but once I read the second chapter, I was hooked. I think it's a very good origin story for Snow." Because I do think that, like, for me personally, and this was also, again, 2 years ago, May 9th, 2023, 2 years ago, I thought I don't think Snow is, like, a compelling character. I don't see his perspective in any way because obviously he objectively is, like, a fascist character. But I do think Sejanus is such a compelling character for me. Like, I remember I started reading that book because I was like, "Where's Sejanus at?" And, like, I think I cried when Sejanus died because I was like, that is my boy right there. Like, he does not deserve the harm that came to him. He tried to do the right thing without knowing what the right thing was. And if I gave him, like, the Communist Manifesto, he'd be here with us right now. I know it in my heart of hearts.
He was on the right path, but
And that's why Snow had to
you're very
kill
much
him.
like a side character.
I love, like, I typically whenever I read books, I feel like I never love the main character. I always like side characters more.
But you keep saying that Snow killed him, and he didn't intentionally kill him. He
Yes,
wasn't
he
supposed to direct
did.
there with the Jabberjays, no.
The Jabberjays recorded him, and he said, "You know what? Imma turn this in still." And that's why
He
at the
didn't like,
end
he
and that's
recorded
literally why at the end
no,
was
no, no, I'm telling you, like, during that chapter, he's deliberating, you can go back and look at it.
yes,
He's
but then
deliberating whether to do it, and then he's like, "I don't know how this ended up happening," and the lady, like, the weird one, is like, "Oh, these are automatically linked," like, he didn't send it off.
yes, but then why at the end does he say, "Oh, I killed 3 people," and then he's like, "Oh, and Lucy Gray knew about, like, the other 2 people," but then she's like, "Who's the third?" And he's like, "Oh, my old self," when actually he meant Sejanus because he was responsible for Sejanus' death because he was the one that pressed record automatically on the Jabberjay.
But, like, he did not intentionally send it, it was just like, it was a fluke, it wasn't meant to go out, like,
But
he
it was
was
still
deliberating, he
intentionally
spent a lot
his
of time
fault.
deliberating.
It still was his fault, like, he was still
He did
entirely
send it, like, he's
responsible.
like, I don't know what to do with this," and then it just ended up sending. So, that's where it gets, like, weird with some of his choices, because like, he'll do something, and then it's not even, like, it'll just,
It was
like,
I
happen.
think it was
You'd be like, "Oh,
entirely intentional for him. He wants to
I
believe
don't
that he
know." Like,
has
he wants
he says
it
it
didn't say
himself.
that in the story.
Yes,
He ends up, like, accepting the responsibility of doing that, but the way it's written
I think it's
is a
written
little
it's
bit more
him.
up there.
I do not think so. I think it's intentionally him. I'm recording this because fuck Sejanus.
Yeah, it's
Where it's
oh, I thought
like,
you meant, like, on the podcast. I was like, "Well, yeah,
no,
we're
no.
recording for it."
I think Snow intentionally, like, you could, like, intentionally, it was his decision to press record. If that was my boy, I wouldn't have even pressed record. I wouldn't want documentation of that because that's my boy, and that's not Snow's boy. He don't have no boys. He has no friends. Nobody likes him because he's a freak. Both the movie and the book make Coriolanus responsible for getting Sejanus executed. Which, like, yes, he didn't pull the trigger, but that doesn't mean he didn't kill him.
I guess it depends on how, like, you interpret it, but
I think it is.
a lot of people, like, forget that he wasn't trying to do it on purpose.
I feel like he was trying to do it on purpose, though. Because, like, why would you record that if you weren't thinking it? Like, the fact that you were even
Well, he was
thinking that.
going through, like, the things of, like, "Well, how can I get rid of this?" He's like, "I could kill the birds, but I have to do it on this day and do that," and then, like, the feds end up, like, coming and being like, "No, this is not gonna happen." He's like, "I don't know what's going on." He thought it was for something else, and he was also gonna get in
But
trouble for it,
he
but
chose
then
to
he realized
record
it was
it.
Sir Janus. That's where it's like, yeah,
Yes,
he, like,
that's my
technically recorded
boy.
it.
I'm not recording that. You know your boy is saying treasonous shit, and he
Yeah,
knows
that
that's
it's
Sejanus,
like
and he's like,
that.
you know
He
what? Let me
shouldn't
turn
have
this
done that,
on. Because usually,
but
his idea is how to use that to his advantage. He will, like,
it was I think it was more of, like, a gray thing. People, like, will try to make it out like he's a sociopath, but I don't
I think he
think
is.
that he was.
There's literally, like, the scene in, like, the first chapter where, like, he starts talking about Tigress, and he's like, yeah, she's a fucking freak, and I hate her. I hate women, blah, blah, blah. And she's ugly.
Yeah, but being a misogynist doesn't make you a sociopath, and it kind of reduces what patriarchal ideology, like,
I think,
suggests, like,
but
how people are socialized to believe that, like, it's the part of the ideology, and to be like, "Oh, well, they're just crazy," kind of reduces their ability to have, like, agency, like, they elect to believe those things
so you
at
think
some
that
point without doing the work.
he
Like, this is
elects
the
to.
whole thing is him
Because, like,
what?
you think he's electing to dislike Tigress, but he doesn't view his grandmother in that way.
I think because she holds a lot of the same values that he does, and like, I don't know if, like, I mean, I really don't know a lot about Coriolanus's character because of the way that the story is written. I don't think it does a good enough job of like getting into his head, but I don't think that like all Fash are not crazy.
No, but I do
Like that's
think
not.
I don't think all like, probably not all of them. I mean, all of them have some type of, like, something wrong in the way that whether it's, like, how they were educated or how they've learned or something like that. Because I don't think any, like, genuine good person or, like, empathetic person would be a fascist without having so much hate in their heart where that has to have something that has to do something to someone, you know?
It's like the whole like, oh, people only do like mass shootings because they're mentally ill, and like it's not. That's not the case.
No, but
They're
I
not all
think
mentally ill.
majority of them are mentally ill, though.
I don't think they are. I
I
think they are
think
making conscious decisions.
I don't think that's true necessarily. I think a lot of the time, especially with the way that social media is nowadays and the way that it can like warp someone's perspective of themselves and the world around them, I think there's a lot more like undiagnosed mental illness that I would argue that probably like majority of at least Americans probably have some type of mental illness.
I do think it's like a severely underdiagnosed thing, like with mental illness as a whole, because of like our lack of like mental health resources and people can't. That's where it gets weird with this book, is where if you believe that Coriolanus is just a crazy person and therefore everyone that's a fascist is just crazy, they just need some mental health help, it divorces it from the reality of oppressive systems and how they socialize
Well, I
individuals.
think objectively like some of them have to because I feel like you have to be like and I think this leads into almost like the way that brainwashing and things like that work, the way that somebody is raised and the way that they're taught these things, that like if you're brainwashed in a way that you are like not necessarily like I guess mental illness, but like you're stupid, you know?
I don't think anyone's stupid because they're that's like the fundamental. It's like saying
But
that
I
people
don't
that
know
live
like
in red states
the
like they're
word for
reaping like
it.
the.
You know what I'm saying though?
That's
Because
just like,
like
I don't
they're
know. I've
being
read a lot
uneducated.
of like, also have bigoted ideals, and that's why like stories like this. I don't know what Suzanne Collins' intention was behind all of this. That's what it's. I don't. That's why I gave it a 2 stars. Like I know what the intention was, or the intention of doing this, and then writing it and publishing it with maintaining a political stance to this
I think
day.
well, I feel like that's what this does is this shows that like, oh, and then like I don't know. I'm really curious to how Haymitch's story goes. Because we know like the basics of it from reading like the Hunger Games and stuff. But it'll be I wonder if she will end up talking more about mental illness because like Haymitch is mentally ill because he's drawn to alcoholism and like has substance abuse problems.
He has like PTSD, but he's using alcohol as a coping mechanism for like the lack of healthcare. So I don't necessarily know if that would like constitute being properly mentally ill when it's like trauma that was
I don't
thrust
know,
upon
but
you.
you
Like
don't
we'll get
know.
an idea of like his character beforehand because we don't know a lot about Haymitch because he's very like reclusive.
Yeah.
But that's the same thing as like, what is the utility of writing another story? Like,
I think
why
a
this
lot of
one? What's Haymitch's character? And how is it like, because they are so politically charged? Like, this is not like a light like political intrigue. These books are all politics. So it's like,
yeah.
what is the utility of telling Haymitch's story at this current political climate?
I don't know. Suzanne Collins said in an interview that the only time she writes books is when she has something to say, which I don't know what she has to say.
I think she's saying she needs a check.
But I don't so you think she's just greedy?
Yeah, I think it's a money grab. I think she needs a paycheck because it like look at how big like A Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, like the film
Yeah.
was huge. Like
They've already
it did
announced a
really
film for
well.
the Haymitch ones too. They announced the book and the film simultaneously.
Isn't that interesting?
But I think it's because movies make a lot more money than books do.
That's what I mean. It's a cash grab. Like
But
she wants the money. She's playing into people's favorite character from the original trilogy, and she's like, "Oh, I can give what do we gain by watching another game where children are being massacred?" Like that's like a crazy thing to keep writing about. Because even the first book, you get like 1.5 of like children just being killed in an arena. And then you're getting this one where you're getting it kind of. And it's like, what are we gaining from continuously writing
I
this?
think
Like,
a
why?
lot of it is becoming like an entertainment thing because like even the thing is now we have that whole idea of people like I read for escapism sort of thing. I just sent you a video today where people are like I don't read to
I saw
learn,
that.
I read to disassociate. And I feel like people like to see stories where people are suffering more than they are.
But I feel like that's antithetical to developing like class conscious. Like, oh well, I don't have it as bad as them.
But
Like,
that's
it's
what
kind
they
of a weird
do.
thing to posit. Well, we gotta combat that. That's why I'm like, what's the point of doing this? And like, I just don't get it. And I'm just looking at like public opinion and census and like the way people talk, and I worry. I haven't heard a lot of content specifically about Sunrise on the Reaping. I haven't heard anything from the arcs
They didn't I don't think they did
or
arcs.
readers. They didn't. Okay, I was wondering. I was like, I hadn't heard
I
anything, so I
think
was like, I don't know if that's a
typically
good or a bad
whenever
thing.
books are like if the author is popular enough or like if they're serious because like Oathbound, which just came out today as we're recording this, which I already got my copy. But they didn't do arcs for that either because there's already enough hype, and then there are a lot of the times worried about spoilers and things like that. So arcs for like things like
Oh,
this
with
aren't
like the
really.
movie deal and stuff too. So like,
Yeah, like, they're just waiting, like, people, like because of, like I think there's, like, so much hype already around it. Because I think a lot of the time arcs are sent out nowadays, especially to build, like, hype around it and to get early reviews for people that haven't read certain like, for books that maybe are not, like, on the grand scheme. Because like, The Hunger Games is probably one of the most popular book series of all time, you know? And so, like, the hype is already there. Like, people that don't even read are probably gonna end up picking up this book. Like, that don't read regularly.
yeah. But
So
I don't know, with, like, these types of books, because they're technically part of the series, I do think that they also need to be able to be read in a different order. Like, they have to be a strong story in themselves. Like, sure, there's a lot of world building that was in the first one, but this is just gonna be another story that's being told from the perspective of somebody in District 12 going to the capital to compete in these games. Like, it's, like, the same 2 locations. So I don't know. They're, like, it's already
Mariah wants
built.
other districts.
I think it would give a more robust understanding of like the plight of the people. Like that's why if Sir Janus had that, at least that we
Yeah.
would have gotten like District 2, maybe him reminiscing as a child growing up and what it was like. I would have liked to see them
It's
go to
really
like District 11 or 10 or something,
interesting
just something
too
different.
for Sejanus's character because, like, there's no like, this is, like, the only instance of, like, class mobility we've ever seen in the Hunger Games. Like, that's, like, the whole thing is that, like and which is, like, parallels real life where, like, the class that you're born in is typically going to be the class that you die in, but then Sejanus is almost like his family is an exception to that rule.
They're like one of the only ones that are able to cross the borders. This is at a time where I guess some people can cross borders, but they didn't spend enough time talking about it to like
No.
explain
That's why we need a Sejanus
why
book.
that's so important. So I don't know why we're getting a Hey Mitch book. I'm really confused. And the
I
only
like
thing I can
Haymitch's
think is maybe
character.
it'll like show about the rebels and like maybe he gets in touch with them earlier on, but the way that they're written, maybe they'll be like more like a grassroots but they can't be decentralized because of the way they're I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. That's the only thing I can think of is like Hey Mitch has a role with the revolutionaries in District 13. So there's probably going to be some connection to that.
You hope.
Maybe.
I don't know
What else
because
is there gonna be?
well, because I know the games so it's supposed to be what? The 50th games? And so they have
It was like
double
a
the
yeah, the
tributes.
50th.
So they have double the tributes. So instead of 1 boy and 1 girl, it's 2 boys and 2 girls from each district. So instead of 24, there's almost 50 people in the games.
Okay.
So I think it's
I'm talking like the plot
well,
of the
that's why I
story,
think
like
it's
what is
gonna
going to like
I think it's gonna be focusing a lot more, like, on the games individually, and I know, like, because we know from the Hunger Games, like, the way that Haymitch's games won, he won by, like, using the capital against themselves because he uses, like, the arena, like, in a way that it's not supposed to be used because it's supposed to be, like, entertaining in a way, blah, blah, blah. But then he does something similar to how Katniss and PETA beat the game makers at their own game. He does something similar. So then he ends up having repercussions for that, where Snow kills his whole family and his girlfriend, I think. So
I hope it's shorter, but it's probably not.
I think, according to Goodreads, it's like 500 something pages.
If anyone has any predictions for what is going to
400
be in the new
exactly.
Sunrise on the Reaping,
Yes.
you don't let us know what you think is going to happen because I don't.
I think whenever this is
I don't know.
posted, it'll come out the following Tuesday.
Why does it already have so many ratings?
Because people are reviewing it without reading it. 750. And they're all 5 stars.
Send these people to the gulag. What do you mean?
Some people have already given it 1
How are you-
star. They said boo, tomatoes, tomatoes.
That's funny.
I hope this book is a massive flop and everyone who rated it 5 stars ended up throwing up and crying and then realize they have nothing more to live for. They will eat cheeses in their pantry while lying on the floor screaming and praying to Suzanne Collins. That is all. Thank you for coming and listening to my TED Talk. And they read from January 13th, 1930 to September 1st, 1939. Some people are already rating it 1 star, which is crazy too, to me. We don't know anything about
There's
this.
Too many. I don't know. How's there already a quote?
Where's the quote at?
It's just Suzanne Collins' quote. It says, "They will not use my tears for their entertainment." Oh, I don't know. Maybe she put it in there.
I don't know.
Brother, I don't know. I don't have high hopes. At best, I would probably give this as right now. I think if it's good, where I'm at, it's probably like a 3-star book. If not, it might just be a 2-star. It might just be another 2-star. I don't think it's going to be anything spectacular.
I don't know. I don't really have any theory because, like, we know, like, the main bullet points of this. I think it'll be interesting to get more characterization for Haymitch, and then we're gonna get characterization too for. Do you remember Madge in the original Hunger Game? Her aunt,
Yeah.
I think it was also reaped in that Hunger Game with Haymitch. The one that originally had the Mockingjay pen. So I'm guessing there'll be some type of connection with that. From my understanding. And I think what I hope for is that the majority of this is not focused on the games. I feel like since we already know how the games, like, we know Haymitch wins, where, like, I feel like the draw of, like, the Hunger Games and even, like, the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is that, like, you don't really know who's gonna win. You know, like, you don't know Lucy Gray's gonna win, and you don't really know that Katniss is gonna win, like, at the point, like, whenever the first Hunger Games was published. Where this we already know, so I'm hoping it ends up focusing a lot more outside of the Hunger Games, like, the aftermath of, like, the games to Haymitch.
I feel like next episode that we do, like the last one, I'm sure after this she's probably gonna write more. Is that we're probably gonna be discussing, I don't know, maybe even like the ethics of, depending on how the politics are, of an author again like doing like politics and like making a political book, but
Then completely being
staying
apolitical.
apolitical,
Which
and then writing stories about children being killed for political reasons, but also not providing enough political substance in your books to sell for the purposes of entertainment, which is ironic because the Hunger Games is predicated on the idea of like making money in the capital. Like it's very like meta, and I don't know if Suzanne Collins realizes it at this point. That's what she's doing. She is in the capital.
The liberal mind is, like, full of contradictions within itself. I feel like this is something that, like, especially reading this series and, like, looking at liberals online now, after, like, Trump is elected and are like, "This is what you wanted," to, like, people that objectively did not want this. And I think that they just don't have like a full comprehension of scope outside of themselves and what they consume and what they do. You know? I don't know if that makes sense.
They need to get with the program or get the fuck out of the way. That's what I gotta say.
Next up, episode 3 on Kristen and Mariah hate on liberals for an hour. Other than
I think the next episode that is going up is going to be our book club book for
yes,
this month. You still have time to join. Actually, I don't know if you'll have time to
you
join by the time this is
should.
up.
Yeah,
Because it's pre-recorded. If you can read the book Eileen by Otessa Moshfegh in like 7 days,
yeah.
that's the next one we're going to be doing. And then feel free to join
The book
our
club.
Fable book club book. I don't know what we're doing in April. I don't remember
I
if we've
don't
decided or not.
think we did.
We got to look into that. We know. Yeah, March,
Yeah.
April. I had to figure out which month was coming next. But
Yeah.
yeah.
So, other than that, thanks for listening. Yeah, Eileen will be next week's episode because we are posting every Thursday in March. So keep your calendars stocked and ready for more lit lib. Okay. Thank you and good night.